Hello, it is February 3rd, 2019, and I'm Donna Dunn from the Historical Awareness Committee here with Fred Mullen and Lee Martell, and we are interviewing a former resident of Dunbarton, who is a Dunbartonite. And if you would introduce yourself and tell us about you, that'd be great.
Well, my name is Bob Blackman. I was born the day after Christmas, 1953. Born at Moore General Hospital, which I don't believe is even there anymore. And from there, they took me home and to Mansion Road. It was called Stark Mansion Road when I was a kid. I don't know what it's called now. But and if you were traveling north on Route 13 and took a left onto Mansion Road, it would have been the first house on the right, which I'm sure it's not the first house on the right anymore. But that's the house that I grew up in, and the only house. We didn't move around when I was a kid. We all lived in the same house. I lived there with my two sisters, and I had and still have a younger sister, and she lived primarily with my grandparents in Concord a lot, and I had a half brother that lived with my grandmother in Concord as well. So it was primarily myself and my two older sisters that lived on Mansion Road, and my brother and my younger sister. I remember one of the memories that I enjoyed as a kid was on Sundays, and I don't know whose idea this was, but I still, like I have fond memories around it today, was everyone would get together for a middle of the afternoon Sunday meal. And so my brother would be there, my two sisters, myself, both my parents, and my younger sister. So I always liked that because it was a time that we would for sure connect once a week.
Now, who did all the cooking? Just your mom, or you and your sisters, or?
No, I don't remember ever. I don't remember anyone ever doing any cooking other than my mother.
Very traditional.
And my father might have done some cooking, but I think it was primarily my mother.
Did you grow food? Did you buy?
Oh yeah, we had a vegetable garden, and I don't know, like, just its actual size of the garden. I mean, when you're little, the garden seems big, but we grew quite a few different vegetables, and I remember that we used to grow a lot of cucumbers because we would bring the cucumbers down to the Williamsons, which was about a mile away south of us, and we would bring the cucumbers there, and I remember they had this machine that would sort them out, and it would sort them out by size evidently, and they had seasonal help down there as well.
We have a photograph of that.
And so we would sell the cucumbers there, but primarily we ate it. And in fact, I don't know who did this, probably my father mostly, but my mother as well, but they would do a lot of canning of the vegetables as well. So in our cellar, we oftentimes would have piccalilli and cucumbers and other canned things, relishes, things that would be down there until someone went down into the cellar and brought it up. So that's pretty much what we had for the vegetables, and we used to do, as like a lot of families probably did, you'd have a pig or two or a cow or two, and that would get raised through the summer and get butchered in the fall. And in fact, I remember as a kid going to Rance Merrill's house, and so he was a guy who lived off on Gorham Pond, Blackbrook Road maybe. But at any rate, I remember going to his house as a kid, and my father would be there with some of his crony friends, and that had this animal hanging up, and they would be dunking them in the hot water and skinning them and stuff like that. And then evidently the stuff must have been brought somewhere to be butchered, but it would end up in our freezer at home. So we had some canned vegetables or jarred vegetables, and then would always have a pig and perhaps.
Did you hunt?
I hunted, but I was never. I enjoyed. I don't think I ever shot anything ever, but I used to enjoy taking the rifle and walking through the woods, especially in the fall bird hunting, because I probably should have had a camera, but you know, I mean, they would have laughed you out of Dunbarton if you were walking around the woods with a camera in the 1960s. But I used to do a lot of that. And I do a lot of that by myself, and that I enjoyed a lot. But I remember. I don't know how old I was. I was young. My father bought me a 22 rifle and a single shot, and I remember going out into the side yard next to the house, and you'd end up with a lot of woodchucks in the vegetable garden. So I remember the woodchuck was way far away, and shooting that thing and killing them right on the first shot with that new 22, and I was thinking, wow, that's pretty amazing. But that was mine. But my father used to have rifles, and I would, like I said, I never went. I wasn't a hunter. Like I wouldn't team up with other people, and we would go hunting, walking through the woods and stuff like that.
So there was no annual venison coming into the house.
No.
Now, how about your father? What did he do?
He had a sawmill, and so as a kid, that's what I used to do a lot with him when I was young. Is when I wasn't in school, is I would go with him during the day, and he had a portable sawmill and did a lot of cutting in Warner, New Hampshire. And that was my first memories, probably. He was in Warner, and he was there for years, and he would move the mill from one spot to the other. Once it got like a little too far for the horses to bring the logs to the mill on the scoots, then he would, they would pack up the mill and move it a little deeper into the woods. And
this was also done on your own land behind your house on the Engine Road.
Eventually. But there was, he was in Warner for many years. And then the other thing that would happen around that whole piece, which you probably couldn't even do today, but there would be these people that would work for him that would live in these little shacks, thinking back on it, it's like horrendous, the conditions that they lived in. There was no electricity, there was no running water. They probably had the same clothes on like all season. I have no idea, but it was.
Were these families or just single men?
Single men, yeah. No families that I remember, but they would live in these little like sheds, for lack of a better word, and they would work at the mill, and they would all have their. Now I don't know how many they were, but there was usually, it seemed, at least a couple of them, and some of the people would commute, and some of the people wouldn't. Some of the people would live that way, wow. and they would, because I can remember my father and the other people, they would move this, they would take this little shed that this person lived in with a wood stove in it, and they would somehow push it up onto the back of a truck, and they would move that along with the sawmill, and the person would live in this little shack until the mill moved again.
Good gracious.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what kind of work did you actually do? Did you?
As a little kid, yeah. I would just try to like roll the logs around to get them closer to where they were getting ready to enter into the mill.
Did your brother help? I assume your sisters didn't, though.
I can remember my brother being there some with my father, and they working together. But I don't remember. My brother was 10 years older than me, so I only remember him when he was a little bit older, and sometimes my father usually did the sawing in the mill. But what I kind of remember about my brother associated with the logging was that we would be there, and my father usually had like this D4 Caterpillar, and with a scoop behind it that they would load the logs onto, and my brother would be there as well. And so they'd be like traveling around through the woods, collecting the logs and bringing them back to the mill. but I don't think that my brother ever worked there.
Now,
on a full-time
around the
basis.
time that the mill was in Dunbarton, it was my understanding there were several portable mills scattered around town. Are you aware of any of those?
I don't remember ever hearing of any other than.
What else
my
did you do when
father's.
you were little?
Well, I rode my bicycle a lot because there was no way if you wanted to do anything. This was like a little bit before my time, but I remember hearing the stories that we got a television in 1955. And and I was born in 53, so I can't really remember not having a television, but I remember that Sunday nights Walt Disney used to be on TV, and so I remember that as a family we would sit around and we would watch that. And probably the television only got about probably 3 channels, probably 4, 5, and 9 or something. So it was pretty limited on that. I don't remember doing a lot of television watching when I was little.
What'd you do outside? Swimming?
Yeah, well, so in 1959, I can remember when they removed East Ware, because I remember going with my father and someone else in a truck, and I don't remember who it was now. My father always had pickup trucks.
So you were only about 6 years old.
Pardon?
You were around 6 years old.
Yeah, and so, but I remember going down to East Ware when they were removing the houses. And so there'd be the cellar holes there, and you could, of course you still had the streets and stuff, so you could drive around and you could see, because they were getting ready to prepare for putting in that flood control. Because evidently after the hurricane of 1938, they realized that they needed to do something about holding the water back so they wouldn't flood Massachusetts away. So they built Clough State Park, which wasn't there when I was a kid. And so the dam, Clough State Dam. So they built the dam, and like I said, I can remember when they were taking the house out. So I was still young when I used to do a lot of fishing, and I would ride my bicycle down to Clough State Park and fish a lot there.
What'd you catch?
Pickerel primarily from there.
Did you eat them?
Yeah. And I also remember what I liked doing, and I actually liked doing this even when I got a little bit older, like a teenager and a young adult. I used to like to go horn pouting. So you would go to some of the ponds around, and even now when I hear a bullfrog, croaking, I think of like hornpout fishing, because typically you'd go there before it got dark and kind of set up camp, if you will, whatever that amounted to, and then you start fishing, and then as it got darker, the hornpout would start to bite a little bit better. But I remember doing a fair amount of fishing when I was a kid.
Did you have friends in the area?
Well, the nearest friends were a mile away, and that was the Williamsons. Jim Williamson. Danny was a little bit older than me. I didn't hang out with him too much. He was kind of friends with Tommy Boynton, but Jim Williamson primarily, because Jim and I started in school together, and then Charles was a little bit younger, but the three of us would spend a lot of time together.
I'm trying to remember, the Stark Mansion was a restaurant around that time, and the Boyntons ran it. You don't remember that at all, do you? Or was that before your time?
No, I don't remember the Boyntons having a restaurant. Okay. But what I do remember, though, is they used to have square dancing on Saturday nights at the across from the Queen Anne's house or whatever. So at Stark Mansion, there was a dance hall there. I don't know if it's still there or not, but
yes.
Because I remember my sister Sherry in particular used to go down there on Saturday nights. But Tommy Boynton sometimes used to call out the song. So the Boyntons, if I remember right, they must have had a little musical ability or something like that. So I don't know whether one of them played the guitar or sang or how it came about, but they would have this country western type square dancing stuff. I wasn't going there because that was like a little bit before my time. Like I would have been too small to be going, but but my two sisters were 5 and 6 years older than me, so the one that was 6 years older than me, so I remember she used to go there. I don't remember my parents going there, but I remember her going there.
Okay. Now, what did you do as you got older?
Well, so I went to the Dunbarton Center School, and then as I got older, and
Did you go to the school when it was 2 rooms?
No, it was 3 rooms.
It was 3 rooms.
Now, when my father went there, they were just building the 2nd room. And my father's job was to go there early in the morning and get the fire started at the school. So I remember him telling that story. But by the time I went there, there were 3 rooms. But so you'd have like, say, like the far left room would be grades 1, 2, and 3. So you'd have 2 rows of the 1st grade, 2 rows of the 2nd grade, 2 rows of the 3rd grade. Probably about 7 or 8 kids in each grade, and it'd be the same teacher. So you'd be sitting there, and she'd be, giving the instructions for, you'd perhaps be in the 1st grade, she'd be giving the instructions for the 2nd graders, and then she'd spend a little more time after that on the 3rd graders, and then she'd move back to your 2 rows. And so you got to hear what was going to be coming up in the future years, because you only had that one teacher. And then my older sisters were there as well. And yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember the hot lunches?
I don't remember hot lunches. What I remember is bringing a lunch. So maybe we went up to the town hall and had hot lunches, but I remember bringing sandwiches. So maybe the program was available and maybe it wasn't. I'm not quite sure about that.
And how about those milk cartons, those little milk cartons? Sometimes you pay 10 cents a week and you got milk? No?
Yeah, I remember the little milk cartons, but I don't remember how much it
Okay.
cost.
All right. And then what did you do for fun as you got older? You said something about hang gliding and...
Oh yeah, I did a lot of that. So when I was a kid, and it was probably in the late 60s, Terry Sweeney, who lived down, I don't know the name of that
Alexander
road.
Road.
Okay, so, and he was older than me. He was like my sister's ages. And he somehow got the design, well, so he was building rigid-winged flyers. And so then by then they must have put in Clough State Park, because as the road went past John Coulter's house and Mrs. Coulter's house, it went down into the flood control area. But on the right-hand side, there was a sandbank there. There was a gravel bank, but it got dug out, so there was a little bit of a hill there. So he used to test his stuff off of that hill, but he claimed that he was too big for the Flyers, so he used to get Stevie Hill to be the pilot.
Well, let Mikey do it.
Right, exactly. And then about 1969, Terry got, I'd say roughly around that time, Terry got the design for a Regalo style hang glider. And so I guess NASA came up with this design. They thought they were going to bring the spaceships back to Earth with this type of flyer, and that didn't happen, but it made for a nice design for hang gliding. I say a nice design because it only got I used to like to say it had the glide ratio of a grand piano. It only had about a 3-to-1 glide ratio, so it had to be pretty windy if you thought you were going to take off and actually go somewhere. So most of the time you went forward and then you went down. But
and then you had to drag it up to the top of the hill and start over.
Yeah, you'd carry, not dragging it, but right. And then a lot of people would say, "Oh, you jumped off the side of the mountain," and I used to say, "Well, we prefer to say we fly off the side of the mountain." But I did a lot of flying at Mount Kearsarge, And that was a lot higher. It was usually windy there. It was facing off to the west as if you were facing off towards Lake Sunapee. And you would take off from that and easily go up 1,000 feet above the mountain. And you would ridge soar up there, or you could leave the mountain and do some thermal soaring and really do some.
But you couldn't do anything like that in Dunbarton.
Couldn't do anything like that. Not with a
Right.
not with a 3-to-1 glide ratio. You'd have to be in a hurricane or something in order to pull that off. But it was a beginning, and it was something that I spent a lot of time as a young adult doing.
Now, did you have any jobs when you were young?
Well, I used to remember getting paid a little bit from my father, especially as I got a little bit older, like I was still in school, but I would do a man's job in the summertime when I wasn't in school. So I would work for him mostly, but I also remember going. There was a country club in town, and I remember this was usually during the week. I would and on the weekends as well. But I remember having like these little standing arrangements with golfers at the country club, and I would meet them, say, at Wednesday at 4 o'clock or something like that, and carry the bags. So I did a lot of shagging balls and carrying bags as probably about a 13-year-old maybe.
Enterprising.
Pardon?
Enterprising.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I tried to do that, like maybe different people had different interests, but I remember as a kid thinking, how can I make money? That's what I used to think about. Like, how am I going to be able to support myself when I get older? What am I going to do? So I would do a lot of that. In fact, when I was really little, and my father would be, so at one time he had his mill operation set up in Ware, New Hampshire, and I remember I would go to where he was working, probably in the summertime because otherwise they'd be in school. But I remember I would do a lot of walking along the road looking for bottles to pick up, because I think you could cash them in for 2 cents a piece or something like that. I don't remember exactly what they paid
Did
for.
you cash them in at Flo and Joe's?
No, I'd probably cash them in Ware, at a store there. But and that's what I would use to buy candy, or what I oftentimes do, because of course I had an interest in flying evidently. There were these little wooden airplanes that you could buy, and with an elastic band, and you could wind the propeller up. And I loved those things. They were probably only about a dime, so you'd only have to cash in about 5 bottles or something in order to get one of those. And so I would do a lot of that.
All right. You mentioned something about, back to the dam project. What do you remember of them moving the cemetery? Because they did that at the same time.
I just know that at one time, so at some point the cemetery ended up just after the Williamsons' property. Like, that wasn't in there, but the story goes that they had to, of course they moved the houses, but then they also had the cemeteries down there, and that they had to move up as well. Now that cemetery is not very big, so it certainly must not have been all of them, but I remember I remember that becoming a cemetery. But I don't ever remember. I don't even know how often the flood control has ever filled up. I don't even know.
I don't think it has filled up since they did it.
So in other words, so they took those houses out, but yet it's never filled with water, huh? And so when I was a kid, I used to. Those roads were hadn't been removed for all that long, and we only had one cop in town, and I used to drive the roads a lot with vehicles that...
I assume you got licensed right away at 16?
I did.
Yes.
But prior to that, I would... if you're trying to steer me away from that story, it's not working, no. I used to drive down to Clough State Park, and so there was 6,000 acres there, and you could drive those roads. It was wonderful. I mean, so by the time you took your driver's test, you had a lot of road experience, not without a lot of supervision, but so I would do that a lot when I was younger.
What do you remember some of your favorite foods or your favorite events?
My favorite foods, when I was a kid? I remember, I don't know how old I was before I realized that pasta didn't necessarily come in a can. Again, my mother wasn't a cook, and so we ate a lot of canned stuff, and it was. I mean, I'm a real foodie today, and I know the difference between good food and bad food, but at the time I didn't. So I used to love to go, whoever sponsored them, I have no idea, but there would be suppers sometimes up at the town hall, and I used to love to go up there because I just thought the food was wonderful, and so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think the Ladies Auxiliary and a few of the other groups would have different fundraisers from time to time. And Annie Duluth, there were a few women in town that were known for their cooking skills.
And another thing that I remember about the town hall was, well, number one, the library was there, but also too, we had a dug well at home. You know, like somebody dug it. I didn't dig it, that's for sure, but someone did. But in the summertime, sometimes it would run dry. And so we would go up to the town hall with our jugs, cans, whatever they were, and fill them up with water. And you'd just kind of suck it up and go a few days, or maybe it wasn't longer than a couple of weeks or whatever, but whatever, you would lug water because you ran out of water at home.
Yeah, that's the only public well in town. So, did you have any ice ponds or fish ponds on your property, do you remember?
No, my father built, so before the mill came to our house, I remember of course my father had some equipment, he had bulldozers, so I remember him digging a hole that would fill up with water, I think probably so that the cattle could drink. But, because we usually had some horses, some work horses, some cattle, and then they could drink out of that.
And you had a barn across the street?
We had a barn across the street. It was pretty shaky. I remember as a kid that I would walk in the barn and there would be animals, cows and horses kept in the barn, but boy, that floor always felt a little too spongy for me. Even as a kid, I was like thinking, I think I understand a little more about this than the adults do, because it doesn't feel right to me. But they used to use the underside of the barn a lot too. Now I realize how come, because that was on the ground, and but the horses would be down in there a lot, and then. So the barn was there until one day I went on some sort of scouting event and came home, and my father had decided to burn the barn down because that probably to him made a lot of sense. It was a lot better than repairing the barn. And
no more taxes on it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, but I remember all the buds came out on the trees because there was so much heat from that barn burning that I don't know, they must have thought it was springtime or something.
Fooled Mother Nature.
Right.
So, all right, well, I think you've given us a great story here. When did you move out, and how would you sum up your life here in Dunbarton?
I moved out when I got out of high school, and then I came back when my father got sick, and I ran the sawmill for about another 3 years myself. But when I was young and going to school, going to the center school, there were like I said, there were 8 grades and 3 rooms. But by the time I finished the 6th grade, they started the regional school in Goffstown, and so they built a new high school, and evidently the old high school became the middle school for the 7th and 8th grade. So, so we were bused from after the 6th grade. You'd have a little 6th grade graduation, and then you'd be bused to go to school down in Goffstown. So that's where I went for the 7th through 12. But and another thing, so I keep bringing up about the town hall because that was like the thing. I mean, that's what you did, or at least what we did, I did, outside of the house. If you were outside of the house, it was usually at some sort of event at the town hall. So, and so the school would have their plays there. And so I remember
Graduations.
yeah. You had the graduations, you had the school plays there. I remember being on stage and singing, and
Old Home Day and different events on the town common.
yeah, I don't even know if they were doing Old Home Day. I've gone back to Dunbarton, you know, as an adult for Old Home Day, but I don't remember as a kid. I do remember when we had the bicentennial parade in 1965, because I was in the parade with my donkey with a sign on his back advertising the country store. And so somewhere I have, and I don't know where it is now, but I have a picture of me leading the donkey and advertising the store.
Okay.
I don't know what else was in the parade because I was in the parade, so I wasn't able to watch it to see what else was going
I
on.
think, was it raining?
I don't remember it being raining.
But anyhow, so you kind of liked your life here in Dunbarton.
Yeah, I think it was a nice place to grow up. Certainly much different than it is today because you had to find your own entertainment. You know, there was no internet, there was no cell phones, so you left the house in the morning and you tried to get back before it got dark. And but I can remember riding my bicycle to Pennacook, which is, you know, the other side of Concord, and I would just do that in a day, and I was young. And but you didn't have the distracted drivers that you have today, so you'd ride your bicycle along that busy Route 13, and you know usually you'd go with a friend, and you'd make a day of it. Bring some lunch, and look for bottles on the side of the road.
Well, we want to thank you very, very much for your recollections.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.